depletion. So once again, we have to distinguish that these are two separate issues, right? So our global warming and climate change is one issue. Ozone depletion is a very different problem with very different effects and very different consequences. So not as complicated, but still we have to sort of look at what the causes are, what the effects are, and what the consequences are. So the first one is our causes, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But what are the effects? Let's do it this way: effects, and what is the consequence? Okay, so the cause is that we had ozone depleting substances released. And we'll talk about how here in just a second. But this is the actual cause, right? The cause is ozone depleting substances were released. What was the effect? The effect was that it caused a hole in the ozone layer. That is the actual effect of what happened. What was the consequence? The consequence was that UV, B, and C were getting through to the troposphere, or the surface of the earth, however you want to say it. Now, we don't usually think about it that way. What we've been thinking about was that the effect was UV radiation. But really, the effect was that it created the hole in the ozone layer. That was the true effect. The consequence was that UV radiation got through. Now, we kind of have to look at then, okay, so how do we address this? What are the further consequences or the impacts that this had? Okay, first of all, let's go back and look at the layer of the atmosphere involved. So in this particular case, we have we can look at it this way. Our first one is let's say that's the tropospheric level right there. But above the troposphere, we actually have the stratosphere. No, I don't want to make it yellow. What color do we want it to be? We'll make it orange. All right. So up in this is actually a stratospheric problem. So we'll just put that in there. This is the stratosphere. So the layer of the atmosphere is the stratosphere. And in particular, we are talking about the ozone layer. So this is where it's occurring, is in the ozone layer. What's getting through? Well, let's go back to our sun. We put our sun out here. Oh, I don't like that color. All right, we have our sun. Still the same. And the rays that are involved in this one are UV, B, and C. So UV rays are the rays from the sun that are causing the issue that we have here. All right, so let's go back then and look at our causes and our sources. So the first thing is that we know that the chemical involved, the first one is our chlorofluorocarbons. And what does it look like? It looks like Cl3 fluorine, F and a C, like that. That's the one. In particular, the big culprit here is chlorine gas, or chlorine atom. It's not even a gas, it's the atom that breaks free. This is the one that causes the most problems. The other one involved is halons. And this is mostly the bromine that's the problem in the halons. Now, if we also look at some that are associated with it, we have ozone, of course. Now, ozone doesn't matter if it's up high or nearby, it's still 3 atoms of oxygen. There's one we didn't talk about that has kind of risen to the surface, that has become an ODS, an ozone depleting substance. So hang on to your hats, y'all. We have NO2. Our NOxes are actually ozone depleters as well. And this has to do with those polar stratospheric clouds that occur. So the more we pump those into the atmosphere, the more problematic these are going to come. So what is the source for these? The big source one for this one is vehicles or automobiles. So you can also see why it's important that we limit emissions from vehicles because of the ozone depleters, right? So we have to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so those are the ones that are involved in this whole thing. Chlorofluorocarbons being the biggie, but also halons, and then of course the one that's affected is the ozone. Please memorize the formula for the creation and the deformation of ozone in the ozone layer, and also how chlorine gets involved. Memorize those. Be able to write those down. Describe them. Big hint. They're in the textbook. I've given them to you in notes. Know how to do it. Okay? All right. All right, let's talk about the causes again of these various gases. Where are they coming from? Particularly the ODSs, or the chlorofluorocarbons. We have refrigerators and air conditioners. And the reason is because those are very efficient at holding in heat, right? That's why they work. Another one is they're used in aerosols, particularly aerosol cans, as propellants. They are used in the making of polystyrene, and it's also known as styrofoam. And those are that's a blowing agent. Once again, it's a propellant. Now, in air conditioners and Freon, they are coolants. And the brand name there is Freon, just in case you wondered. That's what the brand name is for that one. Some other sources are pesticides and fertilizers. No, sorry, solvents. Don't write down fertilizers. Solvents. Now, they're also in firefighting equipment, but the big one here with the firefighting equipment is the halons. So the CFCs really weren't involved in that. It was more the halons that were a part of that. All right. So environmental effects. Let's go back and look really at what I told you the effect was. The effect is the destruction of the ozone layer, right? So what the effect is, the first one is that it is ozone depletion. And what does that lead to? It leads to an increase in UV, B, and C into the atmosphere. All right, into the troposphere. So it's getting through. That's the first appearance of that. Now, what does it lead to? Well, it can lead to a couple of things. The first one is that it's going to lead to, it limits photosynthesis. So UVB rays and UVC rays limit photosynthesis. Well, what is that going to lead to? Well, it's going to lead to a decrease in plant matter, which then can lead to a collapse of the food chain or food webs. Remember, we need to distinguish between environmental effects, human health effects, economic impact. All of those are different, and we have to look at them in a different kind of way. All right, the other thing is that it also limits what happens in photosynthesis in the ocean. So if we look at the photosynthesis in oceans, this is also going to lead to a decrease in marine life, which then leads to a collapse of the food webs, just like that. All right, which then, of course, leads to a lessening of biodiversity. Okay. And our final one here is that it causes UVB and C rays cause cell mutations. So not just in humans, but also in animals. And what does that lead to? It leads to cancer. Even in animals, right? So they're going to have cancer as well. It also can lead to damage of their skin and those kinds of things. And then, of course, cancer can lead to death, which then leads to a loss of biodiversity. And that is looking at it from an environmental standpoint. All right, let's go ahead and look then at our human health impacts. All right, so we remember this from the video, right? What do we have? We have an increase in skin cancer because it causes mutation of cells, an increase in sunburns, severe ones, which eventually is going to lead to skin cancer. Y'all know that. Like when you get burned, you're probably going to develop skin cancer over a period of time. My brother always talks about when he was in college, A&M, he took a job one summer on campus monitoring like plants they were growing through the college. And one day he forgot to put sunscreen on the top of his ears. Y'all, it was 25 years later, and he's like, something's wrong with my ear, it won't heal. And it was basal cell carcinoma. He had to have them removed. Not his ears. The cancers. So, yeah, take his ears off, which would be really awkward. But he told me, he said, the day that he got that sunburn, he said, one of these days I'm going to have cancer. It was only a matter of time. All right, so what else? Well, we also know that it causes cataracts, which is a clouding of the lenses of the eyes. Right, that's what's going to be. All of us will get there with cataracts, but it will happen with younger people as well if we didn't stop this problem. The other thing is that it causes a weakening of the immune system. Which then, of course, leads to being much more vulnerable to diseases. So you're going to have an increase in just diseases in general. Now, the other thing that we kind of skirted around and didn't really talk all that much about is that it causes people to stay in, it would cause people to stay indoors. So we'd be indoors more to try to avoid the sun. Well, we know that the more we stay indoors, that's going to lead to a sedentary lifestyle, pandemic, right? And what does sedentary lifestyle lead to? It leads to obesity, which then leads to heart disease and a whole host of things like that. Another thing, and we've seen this, y'all, we're seeing this a lot, is that the more you stay indoors, it's going to increase, there's a vitamin D deficiency. And this is leading to heart disease, and it's also leading to depression. So the more we stay inside, our numbers for depression are going up. Then that leads to stress and suicides and the like. So staying indoors is not what humans were really meant to do. Okay. So what are the economic impacts to this problem of lower productivity? Well, as they talked in the video, it leads to crop failure. What does crop failure lead to? It leads to an increase in food costs. It also leads to food scarcity. Which then leads to famine. And then, of course, famine leads to political unrest. And we didn't address that on climate change, but it's definitely causing a problem with political unrest across the world right now. All right, and then, of course, that can lead to war, which then ultimately famine and all that lead to death. All right. Now we've got a lot of skin cancer and sunburns and cataracts, weakened immune system and all that. So that must mean that our health care costs are going to go up. There's going to be a collapse in the fish industry, or there would be. And our productivity, the more we're depressed, our productivity drops. And y'all, we've seen this in school. We've seen people being less and less productive. Like, I don't even know. Online classes, no productivity happening there. And what does that lead to? Well, if you're working, it's going to lead to your unemployment. And somebody's got to pay for that. And who is it? It's going to be the government. If y'all not careful. Okie doke. And our last thing is did we win? And the answer is yes, we won. We solved a problem. How did we do it? We did it through the Montreal Protocol. And what did the Montreal Protocol do? It limited the ODSs, right? So it basically eliminated ODSs. And remember that stands for ozone depleting substances. When was it signed? 1987. Has it been successful? Yes. Finally got something right. And it also leads the way for the things that we could do in the future. And that is all of that.